thank you very much for buzzing, for chatting. I hope that will loosen you up to ask questions in just a few moments. We're going to listen to our local panel. For every seminar, we've got 3 people who are going to respond from our city to the national and the international presentations they've heard from those 3 areas of politics, business, culture, and academia. So we're going to start with Beatrice. What did you make of all that, Beatrice?
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Well, my point of departure would be to actually put to the fore the fact that we are living in a kind of a battle of narratives almost. There is an issue, we started earlier on with what Jerry was commenting on, how a lot of the debate of what is happening and the value of World Heritage Site for Liverpool or in general has been dominated by negative connotations within the UK context. And in that sense, I completely agree on how important it was, especially here, to bring the voice of UNESCO. And I say so as someone that has been living in this country for more than 15 years. But that comes from Spain and from Catalonia, and where we value UNESCO. There is actually a point of departure where you give credit, you give credibility and gravitas to the UNESCO lines, but it's not something that I have seen as obviously in the UK context and in the context of Liverpool. So it has been fascinating to start this evening with one question that had not been raised or put to the fore throughout all of this process. That is, what does it mean for Liverpool to be a maritime mercantile city in the 21st century? Despite all of the discussions in the media and so on, one area that seemed to have been missing a lot was to actually debate why Liverpool got the title in the first place. And secondly, yes, what it means. And when we think about that, we get reminded that actually the nomination came on the basis of discussing innovation and actually celebrating the fact that probably the city is one of the original creative cities, which brings a completely different set of associations to what we might believe this celebration of heritage might be. So that debate never happened. And we at the Institute of Cultural Capital decided to conduct research back in 2013 to actually dissect the reasons why the possibility of losing the title was being valued or not, or whether it was seen as something that would not make a difference to the city. So what we uncovered was a deeply divided city and debate with 2 clear camps for heritage or for development that would never meet. A very black and white conversation with heritage being associated with either an elite or a desire to freeze the city in time or discuss what is authentic and original in the city, but that should not change. And then a discussion around development that was associated with this idea of looking into the future. And these associations very much also being linked with this idea of being creative and moving forward. The debate around UNESCO was not really very clearly out there, and the recognition and reconnection with what the title was for was not really put to the fore. But there was another dimension also that was very important to this and continues to this day, and is that the city had just gone through the euphoria of being European Capital of Culture. And the 2008 accolade had been connected with people in very strong ways, something that was in shocking contrast with the World Heritage Site journey. That had not really been had not connected with the population in the same way, had not been associated with pride in the same way, and didn't have the same range of celebratory narratives. So here was an additional challenge, a city that had been suffering and was getting back on its feet, feeling very proud, feeling very confident, and thinking, well, we can do anything. Why is it that then certain rules and regulations are coming our way and might prevent us from taking the opportunities that are now at our reach? So actually what we uncovered with our piece of research is that all of these different narratives were putting out there in ways that were very simplistic, and where not enough champions and bridge builders were out there in a way that reach out to credibility. So, pushing forward, what we hear today, and having someone representing UNESCO explaining very clearly what the title is for and what it does, we get reminded of actually the element that is very complex and very different from what it takes to brand a special event such as Capital of Culture. And it's the fact that with a World Heritage Site comes a very complex responsibility. There is a technical dimension, this whole element around protection, preservation. These are all heavy words that seem very hard to communicate in a way that make people feel excited. It all feels like, ooh, this is all very, very technical and very limiting. But there is another dimension that has also been explained that has to do with that connection with the universal and with the responsibilities towards humanity, which also could be brought in a very celebratory way, especially for a city that aspires to be a world city in general. So I think that the challenge and the way forward and the kind of next stage of this debate, which might become a bit more maybe comprehensive now that we have a special task force, a group dedicated to debating this, is expanding the language around World Heritage Sites so that it also includes the celebratory aspects, so that connects as well with that creative agenda that also says that there is something that is meaningful in the 21st century. And obviously the ultimate dimension that is, it might be possible to be both creative and responsible. That being creative is not just about partying, but also about ensuring that what makes you creative can continue and last rather than being dissolved. So I think that's where probably we are at. And what is very clear is that in this battle of narratives, the world of heritage and those that support that need also to embark and connect better with this broader debate that is around creativity and innovation, that is just, they are not two separate worlds, but completely interlinked.
Thank you very much. David.
Thank you. Well, I'm Director of National Museums Liverpool, and I should say at the outset that my organisation unashamedly wants Liverpool to retain its World Heritage Site status, and we'll do whatever we can to support the members of the task group in that, and I'm very pleased to see at least two members of the task group sitting with us tonight. But clearly the task force has a job to do from having listened to what Isabel's had to say. I think there's very poor awareness in Liverpool about the virtues and merits of being a World Heritage Site. I've been involved as a member of the World Heritage Site steering group since 2004, which is 13 years ago, amazingly. So I have to take a part of the responsibility for that. But I think the quality of the debate about World Heritage Site status has been significantly poor in Liverpool. I think we've been very badly served by lack of intelligent commentary about the whys and wherefores of what value it might be and why we should be fighting to retain the status and so on. And I think finally, in my very brief comments, I think that Liverpool needs to be willing to give and take, needs to listen to UNESCO. UNESCO needs to listen to Liverpool, because as my friend Barry was agreeing with me, it's a tricky old job, trying to run a World Heritage Site in the centre of a very big city like Liverpool. It's not the same as a lot of the places I can think of, like, I don't know, Sintra in Portugal, for those of you that have seen it, or Dubrovnik in Croatia. These are quite tiny places, and you can more or less aspire to silly them in aspic, and you can't do that with a big city like Liverpool. So somehow or other UNESCO has to resolve the frictions that there are inevitably in a place the size of Liverpool, with all the issues that the city's got. Equally, people in Liverpool mustn't just dismiss UNESCO as some kind of foreign body that's got its tanks on our lawn. We have to be a little bit more constructive, I think, than that in debating with the guardians of World Heritage Site status, because it really is, I think, well worth fighting for and retaining.
Great. Thank you very much, David. Barry.
Thank you. First of all, just to say, I think David's point is right in terms of how we need to engage people in the city, particularly more in the discussion around heritage. And I've got to say to Jerry and Engage Liverpool that what you've the numbers of people that you've brought here today to start this discussion and help inform that is fantastic. So just want to say thank you very much for that, and not least bringing Isabel here to join us to have the opportunity of listening to what people have got to say, the concerns of the city. You'll hear from people in the city and questions, and no doubt testing of me maybe later on in our council position, the pride that people have in this city. You know, this is, you said UNESCO's proud of the World Heritage developments, but Liverpool's a proud city, and we are very proud of our own heritage, and we're fighting hard to keep it and maintain it, and our commitment is that. The latest development, the thing that we're doing in terms of that is the development of the task force, but you know, that's not something that we've just decided to do because for the sake of it. We've got a mayoral lead who's here today, whose job is only around looking at heritage and developing the heritage buildings in the city, a lot of which we don't own, but we want to make sure that they're developed out and in exactly the right way. We have, I said before, it's not just having a heritage, it's got to be a living heritage, hasn't it? I mean, I think if people aren't here visiting it and seeing it, it's like having a church without a congregation, and we've seen an incredible increase in tourism since World Heritage Site status was awarded in 2004. It's doubled, and that brings with it all those competing pressures, around being able to provide hotels and restaurants. There's jobs that we need to provide for our people who are still struggling, some of whom are still struggling in this city, struggling to eat, some of them. That we have to maintain, and we've got responsibility for that as a city council. And those are the kind of competing pressures that were referred to before about in terms of trying to maintain our World Heritage Site status, which is important to us, and our tourism, and we're developing our cruise liner terminal. People have got a fantastic opportunity of arriving by boat in this city, right into the heart of a heritage site, and that's important, for us to keep. We've got young heritage champions, and I think we probably need to do more in terms of engaging, our schools and communities around the city. I brought this today because this is an example. This is a workbook that's been developed by the King's Academy in the south end of the city, a school, with a community organisation called the Florence Institute to engage the community in our heritage. And I think that's a really important thing for us to do. I think the last thing I would say is that I think you were generous around the planning legislation. I think one of the problems that we have is that planning laws have been so loosened in the favour of developers that it's very difficult as a city to be able to stop certain types of development. And I think some of the things that we're doing here in terms of developing a design panel so that we can vet things that are coming through, having the task force now that can oversee sort of having a framework for development, the investment that we're making, outstanding universal value is going to be incorporated into our local plan. And if we don't put those things in place, the lack of regulation around planning will allow the kind of developments that we've seen in London. St. Paul's, the developments around St. Paul's Cathedral and around the Tower of London, I think we'd agree would be unacceptable here, wouldn't they? So but that's what we've got to try and do to try and prevent those kind of developments. And I think that that has also got to come into our understanding of where we're coming from in a conversation with you. And you're rightly taking a position which is, I think, the toughest line to take on heritage, which is quite right. But in terms of a dialogue that we have, it's not. I don't think we're not engaged in two sides of a particular conflict. We've both got the interests of heritage in mind when we're having these conversations. And I think the developments, for example, of Peel Waters and further along, I don't think will be developed quite the way that you probably have in your mind at the moment. And I'm sure you'll get a better feel for that as you're around the city the next couple of days. So that's what I'd like to say for now. But thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Jerry, for organising this.
Can we thank all our panellists, please, for their comments? So who wants to ask the first question? We've got 20 minutes for conversation, and we want to make the best of it. So comments, questions are very welcome. And I'll see who can...
Can I ask a question?
So, yes, please.
Thank you. Why is the council allowed developments to go on even after UNESCO said they should stop?
Oh God, I knew I'd be hit with issues around developments. Which developments are you thinking of in particular?
Basically, everything which UNESCO said you shouldn't do.
Can I just say, one of the problems, UNESCO put a moratorium on every development, which wasn't helpful to the city. I'm not a councillor, but I think that was a problem. So there's been a lot of developments that have taken place, not all of which have been of high quality. I don't know that Barry wants to add to that.
Well, I think that I'm not going to say that development for the sake of it, because people want to do it, should just happen unfettered. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, you can't say in a city that was in decline for such a long period of time, that around buildings, let's not forget, that like this building reflected the economic success, albeit built on unsavoury trade through the slave trade, for example, but was built on mercantile success in that period of time. We're moving into, we have to try and build that again for this city, don't we? And we can't do that without putting up buildings. If people want to come into the city, they need to stay in hotels, as I said before, and restaurants. We have, probably an estimate that around 30,000, there's a gap in the city of around 30,000 more people that we should have in work if we were up to the average you'd expect of employment around this country. And that's an obvious point. And not only work, we want people in decent, good work. So in terms of saying we should stop development, I think that's a really difficult thing to do, both legally, but also in terms of what's in the best interest of the city. Should that be developed in sympathy with the surrounding? Yes, it should. And I think that's what we need to achieve. And we have to develop a local plan to bring all these developments up to date, so that we're able to do both.
Thank you. Next question, a woman, please. Yes?
I'm just a little bit... Oh, sorry, that's so loud. I'm just a little bit confused when you talk about wanting to develop the city and bring back, the glories of the past, which we all see around us. But the buildings that you're allowing planning permission for are all generically rabbit hutch style, a lot of them student accommodations, which we know the cheap cladding that's put onto them will eventually fall off and they will lose their luxury price tag. And all these foreign investors are probably quite likely to withdraw. And all of a sudden, since you're building so many of these in such a short amount of time, the city might turn into some sort of necropolis with all these uninhabited, falling down buildings, which is exactly the kind of thing you have spent years trying to reverse and trying to stop the city being like that. And it doesn't feel like you're really driving the city forward, but in fact just perpetuating exactly what has happened before. And I think it's such a shame, and I just don't understand what you're doing as a councillor.
Okay, me again. So, of course, we're not building those student blocks. These are. I mean, one of the reasons why we need to get our local plan in place. I think we could be probably fairly criticised for not putting it in place earlier, is it gives us that framework to be able to manage and regulate this kind of build. I agree with you, and we have to, we have objected and stopped some developments of student flats in the very sort of north end of the city, because it has not just in terms of what it does in terms of the building, but the impact that it has on the local community. So I think that we need to get on top of those kind of things, and I think you're right, and the local plan needs to do that. But at the same time, you can't just say just because those things have been built that they will be empty. There's still, we have an issue over office accommodation. We also have some developers who are sitting on building, which I think is another thing that you might want to concentrate on too. They're sitting on some of the heritage sites in this building that don't belong to us because they're waiting for their land values to increase, and that can't be developed out either. That's not right either, is it? So I think that what we're trying to do is a balance, but we cannot totally regulate that market.
Okay, another question. Anything about UNESCO? Yes, would you like to ask? Yep.
I live out towards the southern part of, up towards Armstrong Quay. There's a building that was getting built there, which we, as residents, were asked whether it was going to be an 8-storey or 18. In fact, we all came to this arena here to argue with the council that we only wanted 8-storey. In fact, it was already a done deal. There is, in fact, now it is an 18-storey, and it absolutely sticks out amongst a whole area of flat buildings. Now I see this red row, whatever they're called, building site, are going to be on the southern part of the dock area. Now, to me, the buildings already along that area are the old warehouses, and to see these glass multi-storey buildings, or I've already been told by an estate agent that there's 4 going to be planned along there. And to put buildings like that, which are going to be multi-storey, in an area where there's only so many stories, why can't you build in the bricks of what the old, warehouse buildings were built in? Why can't you use that? Why use glass and whatever, which is totally alien to the whole area? I don't want cruise ships coming in to Liverpool and looking at a city and thinking, oh, where am I? I could be in Hamburg, I could be in Oslo, I could be anywhere. I want them to come into Liverpool and know that they are in Liverpool, not some glass buildings or whatever. This is totally alien to the city. Or multi-storey. We've already got this green thing stuck on the corner of the southern end, by the... and it's when you fly into Liverpool, that's the first thing you see. You should see the Three Graces, not the rest of these multi-storey.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It looks like the council's got it.
Is that me again?
To answer tonight.
See, I told you it's pride of this city. See, so, do you think then that as a council in planning decisions, that we should be able to have to have a comment or be able to regulate the kind of design of buildings? Is that what you're saying? I agree, but that's not in planning law at the moment. And I think we're sort of developing a design panel. If you put the values, I keep talking about the local plan, because that's the only way in a city that you can try and enforce any kind of regulator, any sort of framework for development. But I have to say to you though, I was on the canal barge from Seaforth coming into the city, and to be honest with you, notwithstanding what you're saying, when you come along the canal through Bramley Moor along through here, the view that you get of that city is absolutely phenomenal. And I think people who come in this city will still see the Three Graces and the elegance that this city still has and will retain.
Okay, thank you for that. Right, okay. First question here. And brief, please.
Yes.
Sorry.
I want to pick up on some of the things David Fleming said, and that's to do with communicating to the citizens of the city and the city region what it all means. And I don't think I would agree with you. It's not been terribly well done. I was in Durham a fortnight ago. There's a small World Heritage Centre within the World Heritage Site in Durham. You see very few of the symbols that are on your banners on signposts, buildings and so on within the city, the 1 or 2 down at the pier head. The literature that's available, for example, this document, this little leaflet that we've been given, is actually out of date, some of the information. It doesn't explain, for example, or show what the buffer zone is, and that is where a lot of the arguments have been in terms of development in the city. I think there's a very big job to be done in terms of communicating and explaining and interpreting what all of this means. You've had the City Council has had €400,000 given to it for some kind of heritage programme from the interpretation programme and education programme from the EU under something called ROCK. Well, where is it? How is it being spent? What is it going to be spent on? When are we going to hear something about it?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. To give Barry a rest, would somebody else like to take that at all? David, maybe? Switch on.
No, it is. I think we're in agreement. I think there's been poor quality debate and poor exposure. If you go to Sintra, one of the places I mentioned earlier on, you see that Patrimonio Mundial everywhere that you go. I've never seen that in this city. I think this is exactly, I think it's an issue for the task force to look at, and I'm sure that the members of the task force who are sitting here tonight will be listening very carefully to that. It needs a bit of oomph behind it. It needs some resources behind it. I don't know whether that's the City Council's job, but it's got to happen somehow or other. Because without resources, it won't happen.
I'm going to go to a woman next. Jean, you wanted to ask a question, and then over to Professor Parkinson.
My name's Jean Grant. I'm chair of Merseyside Civic Society. Merseyside Civic Society was very influential in saving the dock. Professor Gardner-Medwin and various architects campaigned that it not be filled in and concreted. So we have continued this tradition, and we do support the retention of World Heritage status. I think we could do with a little advice, and it should be from Isabella, I think, that the Tower of London is surrounded by high-rise blocks. Is this because it was made a heritage site too early for there to be a buffer zone, or is it because they have used iconic architects, or both?
Or not, as the case. Thank you very much. Isabel, maybe, and then Henry. The bottom one. Yeah.
Thank you for this question. The answer is difficult, not because I want to avoid to answer, but the answer is difficult because each, as I said, World Heritage property is unique. And this very complicated, complex, sometimes obscure process and mechanism of identifying the outstanding heritage values, the attributes, is made exactly to help decision makers and the World Heritage Committee members to decide when it match or when it conflicts. So I cannot answer why it has been allowed. Perhaps yes, because it has been considered that it is in the same height and volume, so we in a way keep the spirit. But again, if we are preparing reports to the committee members, if we spend so much time on each property, it is because they are unique. And there are no ready-made answers. That's the reason why, to understand the specificities of Liverpool is so important when we will have decision to make and to take on what is allowed and what is not allowed, to really put the heritage conservation and the heritage at the heart of the cities of the 21st century. I just wanted to add that I'm quite struck by the fact that we constantly oppose heritage conservation versus development. It's not that simple. We are, I think, the committee, World Heritage Committee members are not against the development. It is only that this development must respect some form, some volume, some values which are compatible with the World Heritage status.
Thank you. Sorry, Jean, no. Sorry. Henry's going to come back to answer your question again. And I'm coming here next.
Yes, just to add to that, firstly, as Isabel said, each site needs to be looked at on its merits. And also, I mean, I've heard your comment, Jean, sort of mentioned by a number of other people, but I think it needs to be recognised that the World Heritage Committee is taking a serious issue in what is happening in and around our major World Heritage sites in London. We had one of the types of mission that has been referred to earlier this year to look at Westminster and the issues around development there. And more widely, you can see this across the major cities, and I agree with David's distinction, not necessarily the smaller historic cities, but the major modern cities with an historic heart, you know, where I think it's fair to say that all states parties and the World Heritage Committee and its advisory bodies are sort of struggling to work out how best you retain the heritage values of a place while allowing the type of development that is needed to sustain these places and help them grow. And it's not the case, I think, that Liverpool is being singled out unfairly. There are serious issues across the board. And one of the things that we might look to do in the UK is we're confronting these issues perhaps more than many other parts of the world. We have Edinburgh, we have the 4 World Heritage Sites in London, we have Liverpool, and so forth, is potentially working with the World Heritage Committee to set up an international conference to explore the issues of how you sort of balance conservation with the terms and obligations of the World Heritage Committee.
Thank you. Michael Parkinson. There's a whole gang of people want to ask questions, so we've only got the last 5 minutes.
I'm Michael Parkinson. I'm on the Mayor's WHS Advisory Board. First of all, thanks to Engage. I think it's been a terrific initiative. We haven't paid enough attention. Thank you for that. Secondly, thank you to Madame Antal Gabriel for honesty, clarity and openness. You've given us a challenge, but you said you want us to stay on the list, and you said we've got to be serious. So I think that's terribly important. Thanks to Henry for leaving us where we really need to be, of how we're going to crack this issue. With John Belcom, I mean, I'm on the Mayor's board. He's serious. I think he has a change of heart. He has said to the Minister he hasn't paid enough attention to this issue. He wants to pay attention in future. Our board is not bound. We can say what we want. And I think certain things have become very obvious. We don't think there's a conflict between heritage and development. We have not paid enough attention to quality in this city. It's not about height, it's about quality and authenticity. So I think mea culpa, this city has not done as much with the WHS status as it ought to have done. And our colleague from CEF has made that point. We've taken it for granted. We haven't maximised the advantage of it. It's a missed opportunity, even for investment purposes. Secondly, however, we have done a lot with heritage, but we haven't told our story well enough. We do not communicate it well enough. Thirdly, we have not been as efficient in managing and protecting the whole of the city centre as we ought to be. And for me, that's the issue. Whether it's the waterfront, whether it's the World Heritage Status site itself, we do not have a sufficiently coherent, clear approach to these issues, which is why we don't know how to tackle development. And I think our group will tackle these kinds of things. And it's absolutely obvious, just chatting with John here, we were put on the naughty step by UNESCO in 2012 because of Liverpool waters. We need to get into a proper dialogue with UNESCO, the government, Peel and the City Council about what will happen on the waters. I think you can have development which will be compatible with WHS status. There's a massive difference between what they're giving outline planning permission for and what is planned now. So it seems to me the crucial thing is we need to find a way of entering into debate. And we need North Liverpool to work. Barry's right. We need that part of the city to grow and develop. It's left behind, and therefore it's a big challenge. We do need development. So it seems to be the heart of the issue is how can we get a constructive dialogue with developers, with the city, with UNESCO and government about the right kind of development, quality and scale and authenticity. And I think in a sense that's what we intend to focus upon and come back with some pretty firm recommendations, so that in 2018 we are taken off the at-risk register.
I'm going to take that, I'm sorry, as a final comment. It's nearly 7:30. So it wasn't a question, but a very useful addition to what we've been saying. So thank you very much, Professor Parkinson, for that. I apologise to those of you who have not been able to ask a question. We're not going to rush away, so I hope you'll hang around for a moment. I want to just quickly wind things up by saying thank yous to people. I want to thank again Red Wing Living and Regenda Group Chief Executive Mike Burkett, who've been fantastic. Alexander Wyatt, Solicitors, and Julian Rogozinski, Director and Head of Real Estate. Want to thank the venue here. The town hall has been magnificent, been wonderful, and Gemma Ward has been an absolute star in helping us to get things sorted. For marketing, design and digital agency, Nonconform, especially Rachel, but also Gareth, who's sat over here, and Andrew Weatherstone, who's done a lot of the design work. The catering was fantastic upstairs. That's Bean and Vanessa. Joe Campbell, here, great guy, live streaming this event across the galaxy. So fantastic for Joe, and this will be archived so you can access it again. The Engage board for making tonight happen smoothly. Thank you to all of them for their support constantly. To our panelists, to Barry, David and Beatrice, it was great having you. Thanks for your comments. And I want to thank Isabel and Henry. I've got a gift for them. Engage didn't want to just have a talking shop. So we brought a professor from Lithuania in July and August to prepare a game so that you can walk the World Heritage Site in Liverpool and discover the buildings in it. So this is the very first 2 prototypes of that game it's called a bingo, that's the name they gave it in Lithuania. We've got no choice about that. We've called it an outdoor adventure in Liverpool's World Heritage Site. And the first part of 4 games that we're going to produce is the Merchants Quarter. And that's the name officially given to part of the rope walks, the Lower Duke Street Conservation Area. So I want to present Isabel with a very simple gift. So thank you very, very much. And Henry. You're not getting it. So we'll see if they want to come back and play the game with us. We hope that David Fleming will be interested also in our game, and that we can look at ways we can partner this and have it on sale and people can join in once we've done some trials of it. So thank you. And you've all got a gift as well. So Engage, a couple of years ago, we had a wonderful event around how do we engage creatively with the city. And as a result of it, we got 10 ideas from a wonderful guy in the Baltic Triangle who gave us 10 ideas for engaging with the city. And we then went to 10 Liverpool artists and asked them to interpret those 10 ideas, and we wrote a simple text with each one based on what he'd spoken to us. And we've given these away free to everyone tonight. We have some extra copies. They may be here as well. So please take them home, use them, spread the word around. And we're very open to this being spread more widely. We've got a page at the back where you can have an advert. If you want to put an advert and pay for some, I think £500 will give us 750 booklets. So we want to promote engaging with the city as something that we want an interactive and engaged and empowered citizenry. So please take that as a gift from us to you. Thank you very much to that. And finally, I just want to tell you that the next seminar is in 2 weeks' time. This is going to be the controversial seminar because it's focused specifically on the challenge of conservation and heritage. And we have Professor Mike Turner, who's coming from Israel, where he's a UNESCO lecturer in conservation and design. And it's going to be a really, really important event. We have the World Heritage Site from Edinburgh, the manager of that site coming down to talk about the challenges they're facing in Edinburgh as well. So please book into the next one. And the final one is 2 weeks after that. 3 consecutive Wednesdays, 2 weeks apart. And we're going to be on David's premises for the next one at the Museum of Liverpool. A modern building in the most iconic place in the city World Heritage Site Pierhead. We managed it. We did it. We can do it again. So we're going to be in a brand new building on the Pierhead to discuss conservation and development in the World Heritage Site. Thank you very much and good night. Thank you.